In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how to insert tables within your Word document. To do this, we have to go to our Insert tab up on the ribbon, and if I click on Insert tab, on the bottom there's a group called Tables Group, and if I click on the drop down arrow, it'll allow me to add a table. I can insert a dynamic table. So what that means is, for instance, I can simply highlight the number of rows that I want and columns across that are required to create a table. And just by simply hovering over the required number of rows and columns, Word would automatically insert the table for me. Okay, so let's say, for instance, this is a 5x4 table. Let me shorten this up. Let's do a 4x4 table, which means there are 4 columns and 4 rows in this table. Okay, so once I've highlighted or selected the 4 rows and 4 columns, once I click, Word is going to automatically insert the table within my document. And notice another thing happens up on the ribbon. As soon as the table is inserted, Word takes me to the Design tab, where I can work with the various options within this table. So for instance, I can work with the Table Style Options group, the Table Styles group, and the borders and shading area can also be used. So now that I have a table, let's fill this table up a little bit so we can start creating a table, and then I'll demonstrate how to work with adding rows and columns and other features and functionality. So once we have a basic 4x4 table, I'm going to create, let's say I'm going to give it a title here: first name, last name, course taken, and then length of course. Okay, alright, great. So this is my heading. I'm just simply typing in text using my keyboard. To navigate within your table, so for instance, from this cell, which is the first row and 4th column, to move to the row number 2, I can use my mouse to click within this cell and then I can start typing. Or once I'm in my first row, column 4, if I hit the tab key on the keyboard, this takes me to the next line as well. So a couple of ways you can do it. So instead of using your mouse every time, you can use your keyboard to navigate within the table. Okay, so my first name, for instance, this is going to be John Stevens. I took the Word intro course. The length is 1 day. The next is Cynthia Collins, and I'm just making this up. This is just hypothetical names. Okay, so this is Excel intro, also 1 day. And let's do another one. Let's do one of my earlier students, Chris. Okay, and he took the Word advanced course. This was 2 days. Great. Now just a basic table that we're creating here, and notice it looks about the same, so the titles are not differentiated at this point. So for instance, if I need to, let's say, do some formatting or editing within this table, let me next demonstrate how it's done. So our first row essentially contains the title of this table, okay, like first name, last name, course taken, length of course. A couple of ways we can start editing and formatting. One of the ways that I demonstrated in the earlier tutorials was to simply highlight the text, right? So for example, if I highlight the first name and then simply use the bold, italicize, and font and so forth. But what if I need to highlight the entire row? So the easiest way is to take your mouse to the left of the first row, and notice the cursor changes into an arrow which points in the top right direction. So as soon as I see this arrow, if I click once, it'll select the entire row, and if I hold my mouse and drag down, it'll keep selecting the entire rows accordingly. Okay, so this is a shortcut way to select your entire first row. So once I have my first row selected, I can make sure that I can make it bold. Let's size bigger so it's easier to see. Let's see, make it 14. Alright, great. So our table is taking shape a little bit, but for instance, the rows are next to each other. I want to be able to insert a row. Okay, so let me show you how easy it is to insert a row within Word 2013. Notice as I move my mouse to the left side of the table, I see a little plus sign next to each row. Okay, so if I go down next row, it'll show me a plus sign and so forth. So this plus sign simply means inserting a row. So if I click on the plus sign where I want to insert the row, Word is going to automatically insert the row. So this is just demonstrating working with rows. Columns, same thing. If I take my mouse pointer and notice I see a little arrow that points downwards. If I click once at this point, this is going to select the entire column. And likewise, I can do the formatting as well. And if I hold and drag to the right, it'll keep selecting the rest of the columns as well. Okay. And if I click anywhere else in the document, it will deselect my selection. Also note that once I am out of the table, in other words, I have selected away from the table, my menu changes back to the standard ribbon where I have the home, insert, and so forth. As soon as I click anywhere inside the table, my ribbon would change to reflect the editing within that table. Okay, so this is done automatically by Word 2013, so I don't have to go back and forth onto the ribbon and use the editing tools. Alright, same way, if I need to insert a column in between first name and last name or anywhere else, I can simply hover my mouse between two columns and notice the plus sign. If I click on it, this will insert a column for me. And I can subsequently type whichever information I like to display. What if I like to delete this column now? Once I have this column, I can always undo, of course, but let's say you way far down and you wish to delete the column. So in order to delete the column, you simply first select the column. So make sure you see this arrow pointing downwards to select the entire column. And on the shortcut menu here, there's an option called Delete Table, or if you click on the arrow next to the delete option, you have the option to delete table, rows, columns, and cells. So in this instance, I like to choose columns. If I click on delete columns, column will be removed. And likewise, if I need to delete a row, I simply select the entire row, go to my delete option, and then delete rows. Okay, and this will delete the row for me. Okay, so very easy to work with, adding rows, deleting rows, and likewise adding and deleting columns as well within your Word document. A couple other things I want to also highlight here which are important working with tables in Word 2013 is, for instance, the resizing of your columns. Notice on the ruler here on the top, you see little squares, and these squares represent your column widths. Okay, so for instance, notice the length of course is being displayed in 2 lines. Okay, so what if I like to expand this last column so that everything stays in 1 line? All I have to do is just take my mouse pointer up on the move table column here, hold my left mouse button down, and simply drag to the right to expand. And as soon as I do this, it'll automatically adjust the text to the column. Okay. Once I have, let's say, my table made, I can also work with different borders and shadings which are in the borders group here. So remember, before we can use any of these options, make sure we have to highlight or select the table. So in this instance, I'm going to highlight the entire table, and the shortcut way is to simply click on the top left corner of the entire table, which will select the entire table. And likewise, I can select the entire rows, which is equally the same, or by means of columns, which will also do the same job. Okay, so either way. So once I have my table selected here, for instance, I can go up to my styles group and simply choose the style that I wish to apply to this particular table. And as I hover over various styles, notice in the background my table also changes. Okay, so if I click on table grid here, it will change the table. And if I click away from the table, notice my new table is looking pretty neat. Okay, so all I've done is simply applied various table styles. Okay, we can also expand the rows, very similar to how I showed earlier how to expand your columns on the ruler here. If you need to expand the row, you could do so. Notice your cursor changes into a two-headed arrow pointing upward and downwards. So if you go in between any rows, okay, the intersection of two rows, your cursor would change. And you can simply hold your mouse and drag to expand the row itself. So very easy to use and navigate within Word 2013 when you're working with tables. And once you have your table the way you want it, you can subsequently continue along with editing text within your document. So I hope this helps. We took a look at how to insert a table, how to work with rows, columns, navigation within the table, and using table styles. So practice, and let's move to the next tutorial.